The Archive Hour, one for the boys, the story of Brooklands. Astley Jones visits the scene of early British motor racing and aircraft history, and it's not all nostalgia. To put him in the mood, he's given a taste of what the pioneer drivers experienced on the great Brooklands banking. Hold on tight.
Hello, wait a minute now. Oh, terrific. Wakefield has got in front by the skin of his teeth. But he's going right high up to the top. Oh, he's having a job to hold. The car slid about, the tail slid. Evans much more cool behind him. Wakefield simply drove like a scolded cat that time.
Hold tight.
He's onto it now. It's also very slippery.
Very slippery.
We go round. That's the finishing straight to our left. And we could hit some bad bumps at any moment. Yes, we're hitting them.
Yes.
We're hitting them. We're all over the place.
Oh, goodness.
Caught it back on, and we're coming down to the end of this section. Have to start braking, otherwise we'll be in the river way. Oh, we're two up on the banking. We're sliding. No. Caught it. But turn around at the bottom.
My goodness me.
I'll try and turn around. Feel now, just going slowly up, that we're actually crabbing.
Yes, yeah.
Because when you get on the slippy bit, it just slides straight off.
Right, now that's an angle of 45 degrees, I would say.
Yes. On some parts of the track, there's still the traces of the paint showing the line that you weren't supposed to go over below certain speeds. We'll have one more blast along here. I'll see if we can go a bit higher. Not, whoa, hang on, we'll have to move around. Grab third, and try and get some speed going over the bumps. Oh, it's moving around. I won't grab fourth wheel. I'll go a bit higher if I can. But I know if we go too high, we'll start, yes, move around, slide, but no. Brakes hard on. Come down the banking.
Wow, that was veteran racing car enthusiast Patrick Gardner giving me a white-knuckle taste of the famous Brooklands banking in his 1934 MG, an experience I won't easily forget. Brooklands, the world's first purpose-built motor racing circuit and birthplace of the British aircraft industry, the setting for many a daring deed and home to storybook heroes and heroines. The late Alan Clark visited the circuit as a child in the 1930s and perfectly captured the spirit of this magical place when he returned a few years ago.
When one returns to a place which formerly one visited as a child, it often seems smaller and less impressive. But the sheer scale of the banking at Brooklands is still remarkable, the quality of the concrete retaining its curvature after nearly 100 years. The vision to build something like this when there was only 40 miles of tarmac road in the whole of the British Isles. Of course, if we were standing here when the track was in its heyday, with cars coming towards you at 120 miles an hour, we'd be dead in less than a minute. It's almost haunted, this very steep section of the members' banking. And you can feel it now, 100 years later, and even in bright sunlight. At very high speeds, people had to really fight the cars along the top. The slightest error of judgment meant that you could put a wheel over the edge and it was over in milliseconds. So many men, and women too, must have felt raw fear here. And it's coming up through the ground, you can feel it.
My father raced at Brooklands in the 20s. I have a trophy upstairs, which he won there, one of the handicap trophies or something.
Sterling Moss.
He took me there in the 30s, because I, of course, wasn't born when he was racing, because he had retired when he married my mother. And Dad took me there when I was about 5 or 6, and I can well remember, as a hazy memory, but going round the paddock as one does, and you know what kids are like, they always want to look in and see how fast it'll go, even though it doesn't have a speedo. And one of the cars had just come in, a single-seater with an exhaust pipe, external exhaust pipe, which was all the thing then, bound with asbestos string. And I ran across and leant over to look inside, and of course put my stomach across this boiling hot exhaust pipe. And in fact, it did actually give me quite bad burns on the stomach. They lasted with me, and we called them my piano keys, because I think I had 5 of them, little burn marks, which were about or maybe an inch by a quarter of an inch. So that's a memory I have of it, but which was not a happy one. But I was so excited with the cars, you know.
Stirling Moss, perhaps Britain's most famous racing driver, with a personal memory of Brooklands before the war. The construction of this huge motor racing amphitheatre was an extraordinary feat in itself. It was built in 1906 by a wealthy landowner, Hugh Lock King, on his private estate at Weybridge in Surrey, and even involved diverting the River Wey. When it was finished, the concrete surfaced track measured 2 3/4 miles to the lap, with curves so steeply banked that it was almost impossible to climb them. Shortly after it gave birth to motor racing, Brooklands became the cradle for aviation too, with pioneers such as A.V. Rowe and Tommy Sopwith making it their base. For over 3 decades it drew the biggest names in flying and motor racing until 1939, when war brought an end to the roar of supercharged engines forever, and the circuit fell into disrepair. The Brooklands Museum Trust was set up in 1987 to restore the site, and over the past 15 years I've been recording the memories of some of the ordinary people who experienced Brooklands in its heyday. In this programme you'll be hearing their stories, together with those of the early racing drivers and aviators. First, a voice from the distant past, Lord Brabazon of Tara, who took part in the very first race meeting on July the 6th, 1907.
Now, the first opening was a very ceremonial affair, everybody in top hats and that sort of thing, headed by Lord Lonsdale, complete in a yellow car. And then we had the first race meeting, which I took part in, and everything was rather modelled, you know, on horse racing. For instance, I remember having to wear colours. I was driving a Minerva car, Belgian car, of 8 litres, and I had entered it for 2 races, one for rather bigger cars than mine, and the other one rather smaller. Well, I must tell you that all the races were really worth winning. There wasn't one under £1,000. It's a very different thing. This is the first meeting to any other. And I started off as hard as I could, and would you believe it, I led by half a lap, which is a long way on Brooklands, about 1.5 miles. And then the inlet valve bust, and the damn thing caught fire. And there I was, stranded the other side of the track, putting this thing out. I lost the first race, and I couldn't even enter the second one, which was, I must say, a bit galling.
Someone who's had a long association with Brooklands and was a member of the teams which designed both the Wellington Bomber and Barnes-Wallis's Bouncing Bomb is Spud Borer. At the age of 87, Spud still works as a volunteer at the museum. A local lad, he recalls his first experience of Brooklands in the 1920s.
I used to creep through the fence with my friends, and we'd sit on the top of the banking. But of course the track itself was pretty bumpy because, as you see up there, it was laid in sections, and it was only 6 inches thick. And I mean, you'd lay that to put your car on outside your garage today, let alone these heavy great cars pounding along. So it was a pretty rough ride in any case.
You crept through the fence. How long would you sit there and watch? All day?
Oh yes. The best race to come and watch was called the 500-mile race, because that took around about the 5 hours, and it was competed between very big cars, the Bentleys and that, and the tiny Austins and MGs. Small ones would just go around the bottom because they weren't going fast enough to get up to the top. The big ones at the top. Of course, there was all the handicapping, which I didn't know about. The police and the wardens around the track knew we were there, but they didn't object to it because they knew we couldn't afford to come in. And when we saw them parading around the top of the track, we slid down in the bushes, and as they walked by they looked down, and well, they didn't exactly wave, but they might just as well, because they knew you were there.
If I was to be sitting there as a boy with you, what would the impressions be? What would I have noticed?
Well, you'd have noticed wheels of cars only about 1 yard or 2 yards from your nose. There was a great noise. Fortunately, nobody went over the top where we were, but it was known for cars to go over the top of the banking, and some killed, some got away with it.
3 cars fighting it out when the MG driven by H.T.H. Clayton touched another car, and see what happened. Mr. Clayton was flung out into the trees. Miraculously, he escaped death, although he was seriously injured. His car was reduced to wreckage. Below the banking, outside the track, it was a crumpled mass, hardly to be recognized as a car.
After the accident, they found my 2 shoes neatly tied on the track. And the canvas of my crash helmet was stuck to the track. Now, I finished up with really what's minor injuries, fractured shoulder blades, collarbone, arm and leg. And I suppose that cost me about 23 weeks in hospital. The Surrey pathologist, Dr. Eric Gardner, was the track doctor. And he witnessed the whole race from the bridge. And he said, when I hit the track, I bounced up in the air, fell across 2 tree saplings, and they took my weight and broke my fall. Although I had that accident, I had some very splendid and nice moments here for 9 years. I was racing for 9 years with my own car, which is an Amel car, French Amel car, which I. But if I completed, I usually made a show of it, but most times I blew up. So I'll go back home and rebuild and start again,
The start of the race was one of the most exciting things I've ever seen. Of course, I'm afraid I'm roughly over-enthusiastic over this, but then I'm keen on it. All the cars were lined up by the pits, according to practice speeds, and sirens were blown at 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then at about 10 seconds, the national flag was raised by Ebblewhite, who's been associated with Brooklands ever since it started in 1907, and is commonly known as Ebbe. It was poised in mid-air there, the sun shining on it, a beautiful scene. Down it went, and away they went for the first corner. The whole pack of them, 26 cars or so, simply struggling for that first corner, the one we overlook here, called the Hill Bend. It was absolutely thrilling.
I think that was part of the interest, this tremendous variety in the cars.
Racing driver Oliver Stewart.
From the enormously powerful, massive jobs like Count Borowski's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which had an enormous Zeppelin engine, a Maybach Zeppelin engine in it. Then you had the very, very small ones down to a small twin air-cooled cylinder GN, which was also among the racers. So you had a complete scale of cars, all different, all with their weird ideas and extraordinary inventions for gaining the maximum speed from an engine of given capacity.
Chitty Bang Bang, tell you a story about Chitty Bang Bang. It's most extraordinary.
MG driver Norton Bracey.
2 friends of mine at Lloyd's, Thompsons, 2 brothers. One of them used to race, and they were very friendly with me, and they used to come down to the clubhouse every now and again. And one evening we went out and we went down to the aerodrome. We saw in the ditch, an old wreck of a huge, great racing car. And it happened to be Chitty Bang Bang. I don't know whether it was Chitty Bang Bang 2 or 1, but it was the one with the Zeppelin engine in, the old Zeppelin engine. And nobody seemed to own it, so we got busy on it, and we towed it out of this ditch and tried to get it going. And eventually one night we got it to fire, actually, and we got it to go.
At that time, there was still room for development in engines, suspensions, steering methods, everything. So your inventor came into it. You saw weird people in thick spectacles and long hair wandering about the paddock, and they were always thought to be inventors, devising some amazing new carburetor or new device for improving speed.
Cobb is lapping at 142 miles an hour. 142. Now listen, he's coming past now, and I hope you'll be able to hear him. He's passing us at 160 miles an hour. Just coming up now. This is Cobb.
Now this is a really exciting moment for me, because in front of me is an enormous silver racing car that even by modern standards is a thrill to look at. It's the Napier Railton of John Cobb, who held the world record and also held the lap speed record, still holds the lap speed record here at Brooklands. John Pulford is the curator of collections here at Brooklands. Tell me about this fantastic car, John.
Well, this is really the jewel in the crown of the Brooklands Museum collection. It was built at Brooklands in 1933 by Thompson and Taylors for John Cobb, and in 1935 he attempted the lap speed record at Brooklands and took it to 143.44 miles an hour, which was the one that was never beaten, because by 1939, when the track closed, there was never the opportunity to go for it again.
It's powered by an aircraft engine, isn't it?
It's powered by a 24-litre Napier Aero engine,
which made the most astounding noise.
When it's starting up, it's just like an explosion, but when it's actually running at full power, it just purrs along, really. It's meant for speed, this car.
How did they go about setting lap times here and therefore setting records?
It was something that had to be agreed with the timing stewards to begin with. They'd do it individually, though. It wouldn't happen so much in a race, but as a pre-agreed attempt.
And was it done on a flying basis? That is, you started a stopwatch as they passed a particular mark, or was it from a standing start?
It could be either. You either had the flying mile record or you had the standing start mile record. They were done independently. But very often these record attempts were done on race days. It was a way of entertaining the crowds while they were reorganising for the next race.
Another of the great record holders was Malcolm Campbell, although the great curved track at Brooklands was never the ideal venue for him. His cars needed to travel flat out in a straight line to realise their full potential.
Bluebird in her new guise was seen on the track this afternoon, being driven under her own power. It was impossible to achieve any real speed, as the track was far too bumpy for a car of this weight and size. As it was, I got a real shaking, although the maximum velocity reached was only in the region of 130 miles per hour. We did not get out of second gear, as she is good for 205 miles an hour on this speed. I hope to be going out again in an endeavour to reach the 5 mile per minute mark before this year is over. I fully realise the difficulties that lie in front of us, but if we don't succeed, it will not at any rate be for the want of trying.
You can't go anywhere in record breaking and racing without coming across the name Malcolm Campbell, Sir Malcolm Campbell. And now we're standing by one of his very early Bluebirds, not recognisable as a record breaking car at all.
No, well, this is one of the best surviving Edwardian racing cars around now, and it's a Lorraine Dietrich that was used or built for the 1912 Grand Prix in France. It was brought over to this country and used to try and achieve the 100-mile-an-hour record at Brooklands, but that was beaten by Percy Lambert and his much smaller streamlined Talbot. But Malcolm Campbell used it as one of his very early Bluebird racing cars.
This is where the name came from, is it?
No, Campbell took the name Bluebird from the play by Maurice Maeterlinck that was on show in London in 1911. He came down to Brooklands with a car, a Dirac, painted blue. The paint was still wet, and he won 3 races in it, and from then on he always called his cars Bluebird. But this was one of the racing cars that he had after then.
You can't imagine something like this going at 100 miles an hour. I mean, let alone 25. It's so massive and old-fashioned.
I wouldn't want to be in it.
No, certainly not.
In those days, we weren't sponsored in the way that they are now.
Norton Bracey.
It was very difficult to get any outside help. But as soon as I got my name fairly well known in motorsport, I was able to sign a contract with the Shell Petroleum Company, who gave me £100 a year to race on their fuels. Dunlops gave me £100 plus tyres. So I went to Robin Jackson at Brooklands and I said, right, I've got £500. I want a mechanic and I want you to look after my car down here. Now, there were many young fellows, rather like me, who sort of lived on that sort of scale. Then there was another grade, like Earl Howe, and very, very wealthy people, and that sort of thing, and Billy Cotton, of course, who had a lot of money and were able to buy ERAs and that sort of thing. And they were in a much better position than I ever was. I was a dedicated amateur.
Next on the list, I need to tell you who that was, because you heard him go around last time. That's Billy Cotton, making music of another kind.
Yes, that Billy Cotton, of band show fame. His tuner, Wilkie Wilkinson, remembers their first meeting.
He'd just spun his car around and he wasn't very satisfied with the tuning, and he asked me if I'd tune it. He said, no, I'm Billy Cotton, you know. So I said, well, I never heard of you. He said, well, that's a damn good start anyway. He brought a tuning fork out of his pocket and he said, banged it on the counter. He said, you're good at this, I understand. So I said, well, that is my job, tuning cars. And from then on, we made a very long and happy association. It was rather fortunate for me. The first time I tuned his car, he won a race here at Brooklands.
But it wasn't just the men who were winning races at Brooklands. Women competed on an equal footing, and as Kay Peter recalls, there were no concessions made for them and no quarter given.
I do remember once in 1937 in the relay race, which we eventually won, my two teammates, Hadley and Goodacre, went out and put up cracking speeds in the OHV Austins. This was the actual car I drove, this one. And I went out to do the last lot, and eventually an oil pipe burst after about 10 laps, and I gradually got covered in burning oil, and I was squirming about. And Bill Sewell, our team manager, said, oh, poor little thing, she's getting scalded to death. Let's call her in and stop it. The boy said, oh, no, let her go on. She's all right. Well, I went on. I looked rather like a fried potato. But in the end, we won the race at an absolute record speed of 105 miles an hour.
Ladies and Clifford and I are very glad to have won, and our little women can drive as well as men. What'd you get out of yours? Well, we only did about 85, I think, to 87, something like that. But up at the top there, I saw a car turn completely round. Oh, yes, that was me. We turned round about twice.
Now, Mrs. Peter, you'll forgive me saying this. You're very slim and slight. I'm not referring, of course, to the racing babies, but how on earth did you manage to keep these great mastodons down on the track?
You mean cars like the big Delage, Oliver Bertram's old car? Well, that was a handful. It wasn't really a lady's car at all. Several women tried to drive it, never got it over 100 miles an hour. But I had a little device of my own, which is a special seat, very tiny, which I had made by sitting in a large bucket of plaster of Paris. And from this, a little metal seat was made, rather like an aeroplane seat, with a safety belt that I could sort of undo quickly if I had to get out. And with this seat, I got very close to the Delage wheel, grabbed it like that, and levered it with my shoulders. And in that way, I was eventually able to lap Brooklands at over 134 miles an hour. It was great fun.
Was there any prejudice against you women drivers?
Oh, heavens, tremendous amount. They loathed us. They wouldn't let us race with the men at first. There was one event when I began in the early 30s called the ladies' race, in which only women could compete, and it gave rise to great comments in the paddock. Boys would say, look out, chaps, here come the girls, climb the trees. In the end, though, we won that. We sort of raced gradually and got better and better, and eventually allowed us in races with men.
Although never reaching the same heights as Kay Peter, a young socialite, Barbara Cartland, was at hand to strike an early blow for women's lib.
At a party at my house, a man suggested that women could not drive as well as men. I replied that, on the contrary, I could find 9 amateurs who could drive extremely well. The original idea developed into a race, and I believe and hope there is a good prize.
And many years later, when I took tea with her, Barbara Cartland's enthusiasm for motoring was undimmed.
It meant an awful lot going in a car in those days, because, don't you see, you've been brought up all through the war, you didn't have cars. You see, you only had horses. And to have cars was the most exciting thing you could have. And you were away from chaperones, nobody could stop you, and you could motor. It was fascinating.
Brooklands in the 20s and 30s had a social scene to rival Ascot and Henley. And although Barbara Cartland may not have made her name as a racing driver, she was a doyenne of the social scene and is commemorated in the restored clubhouse by the Barbara Cartland Room, which is very, very pink.
It was the real glamour of the 20s. I can't tell you how exciting it was. A lot of people were in the Brigade of Guards, and then there was people like Glenn Kitson, who was very rich. He was terribly, terribly good-looking. In between taking out the cars, you danced in the restroom to a gramophone. It was terribly glamorous and terribly nice, you see. And then they took you back to London, and you had a wonderful day and a wonderful evening with them, you see. And they, as I say, it was all very, very pure. And I look back at it now, everybody else says, because nobody ever asked me to go to bed with them. They asked me to marry them. And if people said, may I kiss you? And you said no, they didn't. I mean, it's so different today. They had the most exquisite manners. They were charming, they were delightful, they were terribly, terribly amusing to be with, and they were very handsome and good-looking, and a lot of them were very rich. So, I mean, what more could you want as a girl?
I think we used to drink too much, actually.
Racing driver Norton Bracey.
One night at the bar, we were all up there, Charles Blackenbury, myself, Hugh Hunter and so on, and we suddenly decided we'd mix our own cocktail. So we all mixed a cocktail, and some of it was pretty potent, and Hugh Hunter produced a cocktail which was a third brandy, a third Cointreau, and a third gin. And that was the winner. Everybody said that was a snorter. So we said, right, what are we going to call it? Well, at that particular time, the Daimlers had got the fluid flywheel. So it came out that we were to call that cocktail the fluid flywheel, and since then it was always known at Brooklands as the fluid flywheel.
Watching all these goings-on as a young girl was Maisie Marshall, whose mother looked after the catering. Now 93, Maisie has some very special memories.
I know I used to pretend when I used to go up into where those trees are and all those flowers grow, and I used to look across the paddock and around the things, and I used to fling my arms out and said, "It all belongs to me." It was silly, but it was just one of the things that I felt about it, you know. I loved it. I had a special spot up there. It was the left-hand corner at the top of the stand. If I stood there, I could see all the way around the track. So I used to watch them practising up there, you know, going round. Of course, they used to wear just little leather caps, none of the safety that you get today. And two of them would probably get in their separate cars and have a little race, you know. They used to race one another in practice and have fun. And of course I used to love to watch the motorbikes going up the test hill, because they'd go up the test hill and they'd leap about 3 feet into the air when they got to the top, and I used to think that was wonderful.
And then on race days, were you also allowed to take your grandstand view up there?
If I was lucky.
If you were lucky.
Yes, if somebody else hadn't got it.
Can you describe a race day to me? What was the atmosphere like?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was really lovely. You know, everybody got excited, and we'd call out the men's names as they went by. You know, come on, you know, come on. You know. Fortunately for me, I didn't see many accidents. You know, because there were some quite serious ones, but quite a few of them were killed. It was good sporting atmosphere, you know. You never saw them swear at one another or anything like that, you know. It was always quite affable about everything.
Do you watch the Formula One racing ever nowadays?
I do, yes. It's not the same.
Why is that?
Well, I think Brooklands was a bit simpler, if you know what I mean. It's like boys going out for a race, you know. They were always very gentlemanly to one another. There was never any bad feeling if they lost, you know. They'd probably leap out the car and come and slap him on the back and say, "Well done, old man," you know.
But some of Maisie Marshall's idealised racing drivers had another side to their personality, according to Norton Bracey.
There was Charles Blackenbury, who was a real devil. He was a naughty boy, and he was always up to pranks and tricks. Before a big meeting in Brooklands, there used to be a big poster board up at the main entrance. It was a huge, great thing, and it was used by Castrol, who used to advertise Malcolm Campbell. They used to sponsor him a hell of a lot. He made a lot of money out of Castrol. They put a poster up there of him, just his head and shoulders. And one night Charles said to me, "Look, just before a meeting, I'm going to paint a moustache on that thing." And he got some brown paint, he got a ladder, and he went up the ladder, and he painted a moustache on Campbell. Campbell went round the bend and that sort of thing. There was a hell of a row. Charles Brackenbury was always doing things to Campbell's car. He put bangers on the damn thing and that sort of thing, which he got from America. And as soon as Campbell started the car up, the thing went up in smoke and a hell of a bang and that sort of thing. Campbell came rushing up to the clubhouse, said, "I know who's done this. I know who's done it. It's you, Charles. It's you."
Here's Brackenbury. The pace of the race is certainly slowing up a bit, because on the initial laps, the speed was about 70.71. That was the actual speed, by the way, at 10 laps. And then Vera put it up to 71.21. And then it started to fall back, 70.97, 70.40, 70.05, and 69.87. The twin-engined Alfa Romeo performed very creditably, considering the difficulties of the course and a big car like that. Incidentally, by the way, this hating on petrol may not mean a lot to you and me, but if you just imagine that you own this car and that it does 3 miles to the gallon, and you'll realize how important it is. Well, the position of the race is the same. Vera, Maserati, Racing, Maserati, Pursley Alfa Romeo, and unless he fell back for that pit stop, I'm not quite sure about that, Brackenbury Alfa Romeo. That is the position at the moment.
As the 1930s rolled on, continental road races began to attract more attention than Brooklands. As Oliver Stewart explained, they made a better spectacle for the watching fans.
It was because Brooklands was a round and round track that some people got rather fed up with it and said, "Oh, we want corners. We're not testing the cornering ability of cars." But there is a purpose for the round and round race. It does give the engine a test of running which it can't get in a road race. So I think Brooklands had its point. In fact, we now have this industries track up in the Midlands, which is a sort of track to do what Brooklands did. That's to say, it allows a car to be driven at very high speed for a long time on end. And there is a use in that kind of driving.
Don't forget this. If we hadn't had this track, the British cars couldn't have raced at all.
Racing driver and journalist Sammy Davis.
For instance, in the very early days, when we were racing Daimlers, the Coventry Daimlers, we had to try the cars out on the Coventry-Kenilworth Road at 5 o'clock in the morning or earlier, and we could only have 3 runs before the entire neighbourhood began to telephone the police.
And there was a greater threat to Brooklands than the increasingly fashionable road races. The year was 1939.
Brooklands racetrack might well be described as a war casualty. A new blow has been struck at the hopes of racing enthusiasts. Vickers have bought Brooklands and the track will no longer be used for racing. A hangar blocks the course near the start, where once the cars roared away to thrill spectators and keep British racing prestige so high. This is the track itself, which was covered over with scrub and trees for camouflage, and there were canvas houses built on the banking to deceive the German Air Force. Depressing, isn't it? No, I'm afraid there's no doubt about it. Brooklands has had it.
But Brooklands has another exciting story to tell. Throughout the early 1900s, as the cars thundered round the banking, another equally important industry was growing up inside the great concrete bowl at Weybridge. The sheltered location near the clubhouse and along the finishing straight provided ideal conditions for flying. One pioneer made Brooklands his aerial laboratory from the very early days.
When I was third engineer at the Nchanga, in the year 1902 AD, steaming around the South African coast, I was very impressed with the Albatross. Not the flying so much, the gliding. And I felt sure it was possible to build an airplane driven by an engine propeller.
So A.V. Rowe, the founder of one of Britain's greatest aircraft manufacturing companies, was inspired to study flight by watching the Albatross. The idea of manned flight possessed him to such a degree that he abandoned his naval career. But his vision wasn't shared by his neighbours.
Well, by the end of 1905, I decided to spend all my time experimenting. And I used to make models and put them into a clothes basket, take them up to a top room, throw them out into the garden below. And I heard a rather amusing story shortly afterwards. The next house is a nursing home. And she said, I'm sure this is a lunatic asylum like the next house, where a madman throws things out the window all day long.
Nor did he receive any encouragement from the media of the day.
Early in 1906, I wrote to the Times, saying I felt sure it was possible to have an aeroplane flying over England by the middle of summer. My letter was published on the 24th of January 1906 in the Engineering Supplement, which was then issued with the Times. And this is what the editorial note said. It is not to be supposed that we can in any way adopt the writer's estimates of his undertaking, being of the opinion, indeed, that all attempts at artificial aviation are not only dangerous to human life, but are foredoomed to failure.
It wasn't just the Times which was discouraging. A.V. Rowe may have made his first attempts at powered flight at Brooklands, but as he revealed in a later interview, the motor racing authorities there were far from helpful.
What sort of aeroplane did you use for your experiments down here?
Well, it was a pusher type of airplane driven by a 24-horsepower Antoinette engine.
It looked very much like the other early aeroplanes, all string and canvas.
Well, yes, it was certainly of that type, what we call box kites.
What sort of flights did you get out of it here?
Well, I had towing flights before, a number of towing flights, so I was quite used to the machine leaving the ground.
But what happened once you'd got it up under its own power?
Oh, well, according to 3 witnesses, I did from 75 to 150 feet, but those weren't actually measured.
Did that surprise you at all?
No, not very much, really, in a way, because I was always expected to do far more than I ever did do, you see. And I was never really satisfied with whatever I did.
I believe that your time down here ended when you were practically expelled, didn't it?
Well, I did. I got the manager was always telling me he wanted me to go, and I finally, soon after that event, I was just telling you, I had received the following letter. I shall be glad to know from you whether you intend selling your airplane shed to us for £15 or will remove same by Saturday. A reply by return will oblige.
That was from the manager of Brooklands?
Yes. Well, it was a very good shed. It was tongue and groove timber, plain both sides, 40 feet by 20 feet, 10 foot high to the doors. And they were paying £5 to use it as a restaurant on race days. So I think he was getting a very good bargain, £15. However, I couldn't do anything with it at the time, and I had to let them take it at that price.
The Brooklands Museum has made much belated amends by building a superb replica, not only of A.V. Rowe's original plane, but also of the much-disputed original shed in which it was housed. You can see both of them at Brooklands today. On a par with A.V. Rowe in aviation history is another larger-than-life character, Tommy Sopwith.
The Sopwith Company I formed just before the war, in either the end of 1912 or the beginning of 1913, when we started to seriously build aircraft. The first one was built pretty well in the shed at Brooklands.
This is a Sopwith Camel we've got in front of us here now, the most famous Sopwith aircraft, I guess, ever produced, and I suppose it was the equivalent of the Spitfire and the Hurricane in the First World War, the most successful Allied aircraft of that conflict.
Julian Temple, curator of aircraft at Brooklands.
We've actually got the engine removed for maintenance at the moment, but it's a rotary-engined aircraft. The whole engine swings around the same speed as the propeller. That was the technology at the time, and it's really a very impressive sight and sound. We do keep this aircraft in ground-running condition, and on high days and holidays we have it outside and can demonstrate it.
Quite a tiny aircraft, very light.
Yeah. It was very difficult to, I guess, certainly for a novice pilot, to master the handling of it, particularly on takeoff. It had a pronounced swing, I think, to the right, and quite a number of certainly inexperienced pilots on Camels did come to grief. But
it's got a couple of machine guns on the front, so it was a significant fighter in the First World War.
Firing through the propeller was again the technique of the day, but in the right hands it was certainly very successful. This aircraft's actually painted in the colours that Captain Roy Brown of the Royal Flying Corps shot down the Red Baron in the famous, most famous air battle, I guess, of that time. Mm-hmm. So it's a very important exhibit to us. It's the only Sopwith we've got, but Sopwith Aviation was formed just before the First World War. Tommy Sopwith learned to fly here, again in a remarkably short time, with 1 or 2 crashes as well. Harry Hawker should be mentioned, of course. He was the most famous test pilot that Sopwith employed, and probably was one of the most famous Brooklands test pilots ever. Sadly, he was killed just after the First World War. He would even fly under some of the bridges that are over the track here, and really was a fantastic pilot by all accounts.
In front of us now is the Brooklands School of Flying Limited exhibit, attractive little aircraft which a lot of people learn to fly on.
Yeah, in fact, it's an Avro 504, which was probably the most prolific and successful training aircraft in Britain until the 30s, based on a pre-First World War design that first flew at Brooklands. Basically, flying schools were here in quite big numbers before the First World War and again in the 20s and 30s. And hundreds of people learned to fly, particularly in the interwar period, men and women, and a number of them became famous pilots, even Battle of Britain and Air Transport Auxiliary pilots, ferry pilots.
So could you just turn up and say, I want to learn to fly?
Certainly, if they weren't too booked up, I guess. People like Mrs. Victor Bruce, the Honourable Mrs. Victor Bruce, saw an aeroplane for sale in, I think, Selfridge's showroom in London, bought it there and then, didn't know how to fly, of course, wanted to fly around the world, came to Brook and said, teach me to fly in 2 weeks, and then literally she did just that and was off not long afterwards and did fly around the world, so it can be done. And other flights did leave here for Australia as well, and not everyone got to their destination. Sir Francis Chichester was another, not only a yachtsman, but he also flew to Australia in a Gypsy Moth, having learned to fly here. So can't emphasise enough the importance of the place as a flying training centre as well. Particularly pre-First World War, there were more people trained to fly here than any other location in Britain.
The flying days were equally as interesting as the motoring days then here.
Spud Borer. Yes, the same Spud who used to creep under the fence as a lad to watch the motor racing.
Most Sundays during the summer, Brooklands Flying School had events on where aircraft would come from all over. Some come from Germany, and some of the latest Vickers and Hawker aircraft were demonstrated. And you could buy flights, 5 shillings for 5 minutes, where you took off and up over Weybridge Station along the railway, landing in over Byfleet. For 10 shillings, they'd take you to Windsor Castle and back. But if you were sensible, like some of us were, well, I'm not sure we were sensible, we were looking to save money. If you came down in sort of November, December, January, the pilots needed to get time in their logbooks. So for your 5 bob, you're likely to get about 5 and 20 minutes or half an hour, and they could really take you out. But of course, you had to be prepared to be put up landing in a blizzard or something like that, because the weather then wasn't too good, and of course the pilots were only too keen to get some flying in. And I can remember one day going up on one of these flights, and we heard that there was a thatched house on fire in Woodham, so we decided to go and have a look at that. When we came back, it was late November, and it's getting dark at 3:30. We came over Byfleet. Well, I could see below me the houses, which I knew very well. I couldn't see the track in front, but the pilot obviously could, because I'm still here today. There was quite a blizzard going on, but it was exciting.
Spud got his first job at Brooklands in 1931 at the age of 15, and before very long was part of the team designing the Wellington bomber.
After my 3.5 years in the machine shop and attending the Vickers evening classes, I won the machine drawing exam, and they gave me a job in the drawing office in May 1930, part of the Wellington. I was put to work with another chap who'd recently joined Vickers. He was 8 years older than me, George Edwards, and it's now Sir George Edwards, a great fame in the industry later on. And together we designed the back end of it, the fin and rudder and the tailplane and elevator. So yes, we were working on that in 1935, and it first flew in June of 1936. And then during the war altogether after that, we built 11,461 of them.
In the hangar at Brooklands is a very special Wellington, R for Robert, recovered from the bottom of Loch Ness in 1985, and since then lovingly restored by a group of volunteers. One of them, Bob Caspard, told me the story of how this particular Wellington met its watery end.
They took off in daylight to do a navigational exercise out of Lossiemouth, and very quickly they climbed into cloud and started to run into icing problems. Shortly after that, they lost one engine and they couldn't maintain height, rapidly started to come down, came out of the clouds over Loch Ness and the pilot very sensibly decided the best thing to do was to ditch the aircraft in the water rather than on hard ground. He ordered the crew to bail out, and the trainee navigators and the air gunners bailed out. Sadly, the tail gunner died because his parachute snagged on the aircraft, didn't open properly, and therefore he was drowned. The rest of the crew came down and survived. The aircraft ditched on the lock, and the captain, Squadron Leader Marwood Elton, and the second pilot climbed out from the roof hatch, walked back along the top of the aircraft, inflated the dinghy and got into it, paddled ashore, about 200 yards I gather, and the most they got was wet feet, and they were very fortunate to survive. Squadron Leader Marwood Elton has been back to see us, and I think his personal view was that was the last he thought he would ever see of the aircraft.
Another of the volunteers restoring R for Robert in the late 1980s was Jerry Gleeson, who had worked as a fitter on Wellington bombers during the war. I asked him what it was like to come back to Brooklands to take up his old job again.
Well, I was amazed, really, that my memory stood up to all this. I can remember part numbers, and that basically is my job here, sorting out that belongs so-and-so, that belongs so-and-so, you know.
Watching people working here, the volunteers working here, there's a great sense of comradeship, isn't there?
Oh, yes. Oh, they are. They're all from different walks of life. I mean, we've got textile men, solicitors. None of them are engineering. The first job they get is cleaning details, and there was a lot of cleaning to do. And, of course, they gradually get fed up with cleaning and come and ask can they do a little job on fitting. And so you go up to one of the fitters and say, do you mind if so-and-so comes along as a fitter's mate? And away they go, and 6 months later they're doing the fitting. So we've trained really quite a few fitters down there.
What else do you remember of your time as a fitter working on the Wellingtons in active service? And what sort of state did they come back in from war?
Well, of course, that was 1149 Squadron. That's where this originally came from. Arthur Robert was originally from 149 Squadron, see? And, oh, well, yes, they used to come back with tail sections shot off, big holes in the side, and it was just a case of cutting out the damaged geo and putting another part back and fabricating it over. Or in the case of bullet holes, just smack some fabric over and away they went again. Yeah.
It sounds very easy. But not sure you could do that with a modern fighter.
No, it's all metal now, isn't it? Yeah. Yes, oh yes. And there was camaraderie there too. I mean, a ground crew was allocated a machine, and that was your machine, and you serviced it and you charged it and bombed it up, and it went on ops, and you'd sit and wait till dawn, till it came back. And I've seen many a ground crew with tears in their eyes when the machine never came back, waiting and waiting. One of our aircraft is missing type, you know. And so that was a great thing between the ground crew and the air crew. And I mean, we had one, flew F for Freddie, it was the Honourable Darren Port White was the pilot. And he used to come into the dispersal, get out the truck, and he used to take his revolver off and say, "Yeah, Jerry, hang it on a tree. I'll pick it up when I come back." Someone would give you a wallet, and I remember the rear gunner, Johnny Gray, saying, "Jerry gets a couple of pies, will you?" And they were ready for him when he came back. Little things they did, you know. Look after this for me, in case they don't come back. Yeah.
And what has been special about coming here to work on this Wellington?
Well, nostalgia, Wellington. They talk about the Battle of Britain, they talk about the Lancaster, the Halifax, the Spitfire, the Hurricane. They forget about the Wellington, the one that ran the war for 2 years, which was #1 bomber. It was a mess, I tell you, when we first saw it, but to see a Wellington, and I think we're going to rebuild it, and we are rebuilding it.
Also involved in the restoration of R for Robert was Poppy Slark, and like Jerry Gleeson, she hadn't forgotten her wartime skills. 10 years ago, she showed me how she used to sew the fabric covering for Wellington bombers.
You make 5 holes like that.
Need about 4 pairs of hands.
Yes. Then you put the wire in. You get your needle like this. Pull the needle through like this. You put it over the wire and into the same hole, and you tie a knot like that in there.
And as her fingers worked the material, she told me about the nightly routine.
When the planes came in damaged, one had to climb inside a wing, but you couldn't get your hand out, you see.
You actually crawled along inside the wing?
Inside the wing on a big board.
Of bombers which had come back from having been in action?
Yes. So one had to be the other side, while one was this side to do it, you see.
And you were lying there waiting for this needle to come
through. It was a very, very strong needle. So if you should accidentally pull it out like that, you could cut your fingers, because it was so sharp. You could cut out the part that had been damaged, put new frame onto it, and then you put your tape on, and then they came round and they doped it, and it was done ready to fly away. Almost within hours it could fly away again.
And for Poppy, the war was not the negative experience one would imagine.
It wasn't like that we all got frightened. We still carried on with our work until the siren went, and we had to run across the road to the sandhills, because they'd made long corridors in the sand, and we had sort of benches along, and we could go in there and sit until it was over, and then we all ran back. But I can only remember us laughing and singing.
So the good times?
Oh, yes, very good times. Oh, yes. We had a very, very strict lady looking after us, Mrs. Boltwood. She used to use very, very bad language to keep us in order. I then used an awful lot of makeup. I suppose being young you do. And every time I went to work I had to go and wash my face before I could start work. And there was one girl named Vera Alloway, and she used to sit under the wing and sing, and she had such a beautiful voice that everybody would sing with her.
What a lovely picture. Making the wings of a Wellington bomber and singing.
Yes, well, you see, nobody seemed... I can't remember anything really bad about anything during the war. My husband came home safe, so I was really very, very lucky.
I used to go down about 5 o'clock. We used to go into the club and have a drink.
Racing driver Norton Bracey recalls another famous Brooklands hero, the inventor of the bouncing bomb, Barnes Wallis.
I used to go down there practically every night with Hugh Hunter and Barnes Wallis and all the test pilots, Chris Stanley, and sometimes I went round the track with my bowler hat on from the city. And one night Barnes Wallis, I think it must have been about 1937 or 38, was talking about these floating bombs. And we had a tank outside the clubhouse, a water tank. And one day he came with a whole lot of marbles. And he used to flick these marbles across the water and that sort of thing. He said, you know, that's far better than any torpedo that's there. I think this is going to be a one-upper. It's going to be a good thing. And that's how it all started, the bouncing bomb. So that was one night when we were all there having drinks.
My job was actually to draw up the bomb itself, which had the code name of Upkeep.
Spud Borer was a member of Barnes Wallis's team.
The cylinder was made out of just rolled steel, welded up, and there was very little time to do it. There were only 80 days from the time Barnes Wallis was told to go ahead to when it had to be dropped on the dams. And the bomb had to be designed, it had to be built and tested. The RAF had to form 617 Squadron and do all their trials. We knew we were doing something urgent, but we didn't know what we were doing. It was very secret. We didn't know until it came out in the papers the day after the raid.
On November the 6th, 1935, a test pilot eased himself into the cockpit of a single-seater fighter plane at Brooklands, taxied across the flying field, and took off.
Now, the work of restoration goes on at Brooklands all the time, and in front of me now is a skeleton, little more of an aircraft. What's this, Julian?
We're looking at the substantial airframe sections of a Hawker Hurricane. This was one of the most famous Brooklands aircraft, as much as the Wellington. This played a crucial part in the Battle of Britain and fighter command in the Second World War. The prototype first flew here in 1935. We really have been looking for one for some time to acquire. We couldn't afford to buy one already restored. And we're very fortunate through the services of a British guy called Jim Pierce, who was specialising in recovering aircraft from the former Soviet Union in the 1990s. He heard of our requirement and found this fairly battered and crash-damaged aircraft in Russia. It had turned up in the Siberian tundra near Murmansk, and we got a major grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund. I think that was the first aeroplane that the Heritage Lottery Fund had actually acquired for a museum, and we started to restore it slowly with the skills and expertise of our volunteers. We'd obviously gained a lot of experience in aircraft restoration with the Wellington bomber over the last 15 years or so, and we've now got a small team working a couple of days a week on this. We still need an engine. The engine we got was not capable of being run again, so we do need a Merlin Mark 20 engine if anyone has one out there.
Perhaps they'll hear the programme and send you one.
Right.
Julian Temple, and one of the enduring symbols of the Battle of Britain, the Hurricane Fighter, being brought back to life under his supervision. Incidentally, if you do have a Hurricane engine, or even bits of one, at the back of your garage or tucked away in the garden shed, Brooklands Museum will be delighted to make use of it. Because, like the people who've come here for almost a century, they're good at that sort of thing.
So, 3, 2, 1, go.
One for the Boys, the story of Brooklands, was presented by Astley Jones. The producer was Marilyn Harris.